10 cold case killings that have puzzled police for decades. Welcome back to Creepshow, the channel where we delve into the darkest and most chilling mysteries from around the world. Today we're exploring 10 cold case killings that have puzzled police for decades. From shady businessmen and suspected organized crime activity to horrific acts of racism and seemingly random murders, these cases have left a trail of unanswered questions and elusive justice. So sit back, hit that subscribe button, and join us as we uncover the haunting stories behind these unsolved murders. Number 10. Arthur Manby. At Taos, New Mexico, Arthur Manby was among the most hated men in 1929. Owned mines, arranged land deals, and managed local water rights. The Englishman eventually, his success paid for a 19-room estate, although he was quite unpopular. Locals said Manby used dubious dealings to scam his path to riches. He allegedly also had close ties to dishonest public servants. Manby was named in many court cases concerning his business practices that summer. A federal marshal visiting his estate in July to serve another lawsuit discovered a dead. The head had been detached and left in another room. The inquiry went cold and a killer never was caught. The body was so deteriorated that residents questioned whether it was even Manby. They said he fled to evade the lawsuits after staging the scene with another corpse. About 100 years later, the case is still unresolved. Number 09. Louis B. Allyn. Renowned chemistry teacher Louis B. Allyn created the early 1900s expose The Westfield Pure Food Book on food safety. Although the book advocated the pure food movement, it startled readers. Congress approved the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1906 within the movement. Strong and expensive safety rules for food manufacturers followed from it. Not only did Allyn infuriated industrialists, the chemist testified against a group engaged in organized crime. He allegedly also possessed a patent sought by the Nazi administration of Germany. Police therefore took numerous reasons into account when Allyn was shot to death in his Massachusetts house in 1940. Strangely, the scientist died reading a book titled The Gun. Public uproar notwithstanding, investigators were unable to find any leads, especially when many parties had motives. Still unresolved 85 years later is Alice's death. Number 8. Elbert Williams. The way black people were treated in Brownsville, Tennessee, where Elbert Williams lived in 1940, disappointed him. Seeking more for his neighbors, he co-founded an NAACP branch nearby. Membership shot forward, and Williams valiantly guided the group in the civil rights fight. Williams was overheard making group meeting plans one day in June. He was taken under police custody. Williams was freed from the local jail the next day and never seen alive once more. 2 days later, Williams's body surfaced in a nearby river. He had been whipped, then shot twice in the chest. The activist was fast buried in an unidentified grave. Members of a grand jury inquiry decided the death to be a murder by parties unknown, without rendering any justice. Until 2018, the case was mainly forgotten until Tennessee's civil rights crimes cold case law passed, giving hope for justice to be done. Sadly, the U.S. Department of Justice ended its inquiry into Williams's murder later that year. Number 7. Naomi Cheney. Native from Alabama, Naomi Cheney went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, during World War II to enlist in the Women's Army Corps. The 25-year-old completed her duty at the nearby Army base one day in October 1943 and headed her regular way home. She never got it. 3 blocks from her residence, a girl playing nearby discovered Cheney's body under a bridge. The death from the outset perplexed police. They were aware Naomi had suffered blunt force injuries to her skull, thus death. Her body also clearly had been left close to her initial attack. Police, nevertheless, were not sure why the murder took place. Living near the site of her body discovery, a local farmhand was apprehended by investigators. On the man's shoes were blood of the woman's type. Though authorities were unable to confirm it was Cheney's blood because DNA testing did not exist in 1943. Police set the free agricultural worker. Though local accounts say he died later in the battle, he was never formally named. Any chance for justice followed him. The killer of Cheney is still unidentified. Number 6. The Phantom Killer. Fear swept over Texarkana, Arkansas in the spring of 1946. The cops were unable to identify a killer prowling the Texas border town. Couples parked in Lover's Lane-type areas throughout town were singled at random. The killer shot 8 people, 5 of them dead between February and May. Regarding the killer, police knew nothing. Even his horrific moniker in local news sources implied a ghost. First 2 victims of the Phantom Killer survived gunshot wounds in February. 4 weeks later, he shot Polly Ann Moore and Richard Griffin. Weeks later, he killed Betty Jo Booker and Paul Martin. He killed Virgil Starks in May and gravely injured his wife. Confused police asked the Texas Rangers for assistance. All summer, the state lawmen walked Texarkana. The assaults halted and the Rangers departed town. The Phantom Killer vanished, never to resurface. Number 5. Orville Gibson. In the little northeastern Vermont village of Newberry, Orville Gibson was a dairyman. Many in town claimed to detest the rich farmer. Thus, there were stories circulating that he had suffered a grisly death when he vanished on New Year's Eve, 1957. One recurring complaint was that Gibson allegedly mistreated one of his farm workers. Town residents claimed to have kidnapped Orville and dumped him in the trunk of a car, where he perished, in search of mob justice. 3 months later, Gibson's body surfaced in a nearby river. Investigators think his shackled-together hands point to foul play. Should residents know the truth about Orville's passing, they would not say. State authorities questioned several dozen people before finally arresting 2. Charged with murder, the couple underwent court trials and were cleared. Police never once obtained a strong lead in the matter. A Vermont judge who represented one of the 2 accused men decades ago released a book in 2015 speculating that Gibson might have killed himself. Number 4. James Brazier. At the height of the civil rights struggle, black man James Brazier lived in Dawson, Georgia. Driving home from church one morning in April 1958, he noticed a police officer mistreating another black motorist. James drove over to step in and noticed his father was the other driver. He sought to divide the 2, but the elder man was caught by the officer on a bogus drunk driving allegation. The police and his buddy paid James's house a visit hours later. He was arrested, beaten quite badly, and sent to jail. Once there, James was thrown in a holding cell after a doctor ruled he drunk. The cops came again that evening and beat Brazier more extensively. Released the next morning to his shocked wife was he. He was denied treatment at the Dawson hospital she brought him. She drove him 60 miles into Columbus to another hospital. 5 days later, his injuries claimed his life. Brazier's death is an unresolved murder since local police refrained from charging the officials and a federal grand jury eventually concurred. Number 3. Moore Oneal. Oneal Moore and David Rogers became the first black deputies for the Washington Parish Sheriff's Department in Louisiana on June 1, 1964. One day following historic events, the deputies answered a roadside brush fire. A pickup truck suddenly turned up next to their car. Reared up and firing shots was a man on the truck bed. Moore dead right away after being shot in the back of the head. Rogers had shots in his eye and shoulder. He survived, but spent his life blinded. Rogers described the truck to radio dispatchers as a dark vehicle with a Confederate flag flown from the back. Police questioned more than 50 white local citizens. Although one individual was arrested, he paid bail and offered an alibi. Moore's killer never turned up, although the FBI and the Louisiana State Police took over the case. Number 2. Nick Jeatran, Jane. In the 1960s, Nick and Jane Jeatran relocated to Clearwater, Florida to savor warm weather retirement. But for the couple on Christmas Eve 1968, it proved fatal. One buddy dropped Christmas presents by that day. The friend and a neighbor entered the house through an unlocked rear door when nobody answered the door. There they came upon a horrific scene. The couple had been targets of severe attack. Both had a blunt item repeatedly strike their heads. The woman, 74, was already dead. Her 82-year-old husband was hardly hanging on. Rushed Nick to a nearby hospital where he had surgery, first responders. Sadly, 3 days later, he passed away. Police responding to calls found jewelry missing from the house. Detectives reasoned the pair was attacked by a surprised burglar. There was no evidence of a murder weapon. The double murder is unresolved today. Number 1. Matthew Morgan. March 1977 saw Charles Morgan's strange last days start. From his Tucson, Arizona house, the financial manager fled. He meant to report to the office, but he vanished for 3 days. When he got home, he informed his wife someone had threatened his life and drugged him. He also asserted he was indeed a U.S. Treasury Department secret operative. 2 months later, Morgan vanished once more. He left for 9 days this time, and an unidentified woman calling herself Green Eyes called his wife. Green Eyes assured the frightened woman her husband was all right. 2 days later, Morgan was dead in the desert near Tucson. A gunshot to the rear of his head proved the cause of death. Ballistics verified the bullet originated with his own weapon. Morgan was seen sporting a ballistic vest and carrying a $2 bill attached to his underpants bearing names written on it. Police discovered extra weapons and ammunition in his adjacent car, as well as one of his teeth tucked in a handkerchief. Green Eyes said Morgan was slain for his planned crime activities and phoned the police. Police were unsure if that was accurate. Nobody has ever figured out his murder. Thanks for joining us on this eerie journey into some of the most perplexing cold case killings in history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling content. What do you think happened in these cases? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and stay tuned to Creepshow for more tales of the unexplained and the unknown.